Assalamu alaikum. This is our second lecture for arms control and disarmament. Challenges and opportunities. First part. As we have discussed before the midst that arms control and disarmament is a wide topic, and it covers a lot of things, like a lot of treaties, and it has evolved through different stages. So first of all, we'll differentiate it between arms control and disarmament. What is actually arm control? Arms control is basically a restriction upon protection, stockpiling, proliferation, and use of conventional weapon and weapon of mass destruction, and we can even say that arms control denotes rules for limiting arms competition rather than reserving it or eliminating it totally. In addition, we can say it like we can, by freezing arms, limiting it, reducing it, and polishing it. All these things that we have discussed can be applied practically by bilateral or multilateral treaties. Whereas on the other hand, if we talk about disarmament, disarmament is actually the elimination of entire weapon system category, or disarmament is the reduction of number of weapons and troops maintained by a state. Elimination of a nuclear weapon, even, like for example, we can give the example of South Africa over here. South Africa has disarmed itself of nuclear weapon right after the end of Cold War and disintegration of Soviet Union. Why they have developed weapon? Only because of security reason, because Soviet Union has developed a base in the north of South Africa in Angola, and at that time Soviet Union was having a policy of expansionism and annexation. So in response, South Africa has developed a weapon, but when Soviet Union was disintegrated, South Africa even dismantled its program and abandoned it. And another example is Ukraine. Ukraine has got the nuclear weapon right after its independence, because the Soviet Union has placed the weapon in Ukraine, and when the Ukraine got independence, automatically Ukraine got the weapon after it birth. But even Ukraine has abandoned its weapon. So this was the difference in between arms control and disarmament. To cut it short again, arms control is to control something, to limit something, to freeze something, whereas disarmament mean to eliminate or to eliminate something. And now the important question is, it's quite easy to say something verbally, or to discuss something in a round table discussion under a favorable environment, but it's quite difficult to implement anything in the field where there is a war ongoing, or there is conflict, or there can be a possibility of nuclear exchange. How this arms control can take place? There are a few points that I would discuss over here one by one. It can take part under a ceasefire agreement, and here we can give the example of the ceasefire in between North Korea and South Korea during the Korean War, and a truce was signed Uh, but though a truce was signed that had stopped the war, but unfortunately it couldn't work further and for the control of arms. And the second point is by imposing peace treaties on the defeated countries, and it happened at the end of World War I and World War II. In both of the war, whichever party was conquered, whichever party lost the war, had to submit to different peace treaties, and those were actually imposed, and a lot of clauses were there in the treaties that the parties who have lost the war won't be allowed to develop their own weapon system or their own nuclear weapon system. So this is another point. The first one was ceasefire arrangement. The second one is imposing peace treaties upon defeated countries. The third point I would mention over here is after the termination of interstate conflict. And the fourth point is that sanctions can be imposed on the aggressor countries under the UN Charter. Like for example 1991 war, UN has took a unilateral action, and UN has imposed severe sanction upon Iraq. So this was how we have to bring this arms control thing in how this was something that we have discussed, that how we should apply this arms control in the field. Now the question arises that why this disarmament and arm control is so important. Why arms should be controlled, or why the a country should be disarmed. It is because arms causes wars, and wars causes arms race. We can quote an example over here, like for example, if the countries doesn't have a standing military army in the world, like for example, if a region is free of military, so obviously they are not gonna deter each other because they don't have a strong standing army. Like for example, if any of the country is not strong conventionally, so that country is not gonna deter their immediate neighbor or neighbors in the region. So but right now we have developed such weapons that can kill hundreds of thousands of people in the blink of eye. One thing should be clear, that war is unavoidable, but if we limitize the arms, if we control them, or if we are able to disarm them, it means that we would minimize maximum will minimize the chance of war maximum. And this is how we can contribute to peace a bit. Another reason why this arm should be controlled or disarmed, the word should be disarmed, because of the fear of nuclear war. Like for example, this North Korean state has acquired nuclear weapon, and you can never trust a dictator or a king about his moods, and it depends upon his mood swing that when he launches the weapon against nuclear weapon against his enemies. So if the weapon is in the hand of a democratic state, we can say that it's safe to some extent. And one thing I'll mention again related to the first point that I have mentioned, arms causes war and war wars causes arms race. Like for example, if we talk about the example in between Pakistan and India, Pakistan and India are rival since their births, and they have invested so much in military. Day before yesterday, this Pakistani budget of 2020 to 2021 was announced, and in that the military was having a budget of almost 1400 billion rupees, whereas in comparison to this defense budget, the education budget was only 5 billion rupees. And this is an alarming situation. It's not like because Pakistan wanted to develop a strong army, no, it's not like that, but it's because the system, real structure realism, it is because the fault of the structure that has actually forced Pakistan to invest so much in its defense because of the insecurities and vulnerabilities in the region. Thank you so much. It was the first part, and I'll come up with the second part soon of this topic. Allah Hafiz.